Happiness is beautiful, it's a kind reality. Happiness is the highest good, happiness is free. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.
Welcome to the Happiness Show. This is George Ortega. I'm here to talk about happiness because happiness is, always has been, and always will be the point of it all. Today we're going to be talking about happiness through living in the present, and we have a very special guest with us. Paula Caracappa established the Center for Self-Empowerment. She's a recognized leader in teaching and facilitating contemporary Western meditation. Paula teaches the 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program at the Northern Westchester Hospital's Center for Health and Healing. Paula, welcome to the show.
Thank you, George.
Okay, before we begin, can you describe your work to the audience?
Yeah, the name of my business is the Center for Self-Empowerment, and my work is about helping people to be well in body, mind, and spirit. And wellness is very related to happiness because when we're unwell, generally we're not happy. And I do my work through several different modalities, and one of them is counseling, one of them is meditation, as you mentioned, another one is hypnotherapy, and I also do energy work, Reiki and polarity, which are both ways of aligning and enhancing the energy of a person, the life force of a person. And one of my topics that I speak about is living in the present, which is certainly something that I counsel all of my clients about, is the value and the richness of the present moment.
Okay, well, let's begin with that. Can you give kind of like a definition of what it is to live in the present?
You know, living in the present is a very tricky thing. It's very hard for most of us because we are very frequently thinking about the past or the future. So living in the present moment is about being entirely here with whomever we're speaking with, in the surroundings that we're in, being very, very present, being aware of what's going on in our lives at any given moment. And as I said, it's a tricky thing. For most of us, that's a challenge.
How did you personally in your life come to appreciate the value of living in the present?
Yeah. You know, I was someone who did not live, my personal story is I didn't live in the past a lot. There's a great quotation about living in the present, and it goes this way: he who lives in the past lives in shame. He who lives in the future lives in fear. But he who lives in the present lives in eternity. And that was very much my story. When I went to the past, I had a lot of shame. I'm a recovering alcoholic, and there was a lot of difficulty in my past life. So I generally didn't go to the past, but where I did go was to the future. I was always planning what was going to happen in the future. I was always projecting how things would turn out. A really good example of it is when my son first got his driver's license. And you know, as a parent, you worry about them being out there in the world and what's going to happen to them. And my son was very, very good. He always came home on time. He was never, thank God, he was never a problematic child, even as a teenager. But he had gotten his driver's license, and he was due home at 11, and I was lying in bed, and it was maybe 11:15, and I started projecting and thinking about the future. And I was projecting that as an inexperienced driver, he would have an accident. And if he had an accident, he'd be hurt, he'd need medical assistance. And did I pay the medical insurance? And what if I didn't pay the medical insurance and we ended up bankrupt because my son had this accident? So this was the kind of thinking that I could do. Now, meanwhile, the child came home on time, he was fine. But that kind of removing myself from the present moment and going into the future, very often in a dark and fearful way, definitely not a happy thing to do that. And I came to see how much I did that in my life and how much I missed my life because I was always someplace else. So I started working on that Meditation was a big part of learning to live in the present. Meditation is very much about being here now. Meditation is about being here now in a very still way, being present with the spirit. Living life in the present moment is also about being here now and being very aware of what's going on with us and around us.
Okay, now, how much time are we really in the present? How much time do we really spend in the present?
That's a very good question, and let me ask you to think about this for yourself for a moment. When you're in the shower in the morning, are you in the shower? Are you there with the soap and whatever? Or are you thinking about what's going to happen later in the day? When you're driving your car, are you driving your car? Are you seeing the cars ahead of you and seeing what's around you? Or are you thinking about a conversation you're going to have with someone or a conversation you had yesterday? When you're eating a meal, are you eating the meal? Are you with the food? Are you tasting it? Are you noticing the textures and colors and aroma of the meal? Or are you someplace else? So think about that for a moment for yourself, average human being, and tell me how much time you think you spend in the present moment, because I do have a statistic for you.
That's a good question. I mean, with me, I think I spend most of my time in the future. In terms of like my personal happiness, what I like to do is like I try to, for example, smile as much as possible. So that'll be a constant reminder that if my thoughts may stray to the future, at least, there'll be a part of me that'll be, maintaining that happiness feeling. But I'd say I spend well over 50, 60. I would say I'd spend at least 80% of my time in the future. Yeah.
The statistic is 9.6% of the time we're present, and the rest of the time we are someplace else. So that's a very interesting thing when you consider really our life, the only time we have is the present, and we go away from it so frequently. If you look at children are very present. They are rarely thinking about the past or the future. And in terms of happiness, we've all seen children so enjoying the simplest things. We've all had the experience of seeing a child who gets a new toy and they ignore the toy and they play with the box because it's so much fun and they're into it and they're enjoying it. They're very present. And that is the key to having an enjoyable, rich, and a happy life, is being in the present. And it's so easy to get drawn away to other aspects, to the future.
Right. So yeah, we were talking before. You were referring to what might be called the gift of the present.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much, I guess, what it's about. Just that that our feelings, our happiness, our life really is in the present.
It really is in the present moment. And something about going into the past and the future. So frequently we go there with a negative frame around it. We go to the past and we so often look at the things, as the quotation that I mentioned, we look at the things that we're ashamed of, or we look at the conversations we had and we think about, oh, I should have said that, or I wish I had said that. We look at the negative experiences in our lives to relive them. They haven't been resolved in some cases, so we relive them. So we're in a negative place so often. Not always. Sometimes we go to the past and we think about something happy, a great golf shot that we made, or whatever it might be. But that's not usually the case. Usually the case is that we're looking at negative things. And when we go to the future, very often it is a fearful future. It's all of the what-ifs that we're looking at in the future. But when you think about the present moment, most present moments are lovely. We're right this moment. We're sitting here. We're safe. We're warm. We're comfortable. Okay, the lights are a little hot, but we're basically comfortable here. We're well fed. We're having a nice conversation. The present moment is so often so rich, and we miss it. And by missing the present moment, we miss our whole life, because all it is a series of present moments.
Interesting. So what is it, do you think, that pulls us away from the present moment into the past and future? And then, like, how do we, what is the process of just like honing in on this present and staying with it?
Yeah. A piece of that has to do with the concept of acceptance. When we get pulled into the past, it's so often because we're not accepting some aspect of the past. And in thinking about it, very often we're trying to change it. Now the reality is the past is never going to change. It is whatever it is, it is. But so often our thoughts go to rearranging the past. If only I had done that. If only this person had done this. And we're trying to rearrange it, and we can't. And if we could accept what the past has been, with whatever good things, bad things, lessons might have been in the past, if we can accept that and let it go, then we can be in the present moment. And when we go to the future, you know, there's the issue of planning for the future. And I'm a planner. I believe in planning. But planning itself is a present moment exercise. It switches into a projection when we're planning the outcome of what our actions are. And if we can make the plan and then do it without projecting the outcome, and having in our hearts and in our spirits a sense of acceptance of whatever the future unfolds, a belief that the future will unfold the way it's supposed to, that in fact there is, the point of the universe is goodness, maybe happiness, that if we can have faith in that, we don't have to worry so much about the future. So in terms of a practice of being present, it's very meditative. You know, in meditation, what I teach my students is that as you're trying to be still and your mind pulls you to the past or to the future, you notice that and you come back into your breath or whatever the particular practice of that day is. In life, in our everyday life, it's exactly the same thing. When I notice that I'm thinking about something that happened yesterday, I notice that and I try to come back and be here now. You know, the present moment is so rich with so many experiences, so much to learn. The only moment that we actually learn anything is in the present moment. The only time we can change anything in our lives is in the present moment. So this is it. This is the rich moment. When we're in the present moment and we're fully here, we get to use all of our senses. That's part of being plugged into the present moment. You know, I mentioned before about eating and not being with your food. You miss the meal when you're someplace else. So being present is really where the richness of life lies. Getting there is a matter of constant practice, just like the practice of meditation, the practice of yoga. We practice being present. We notice when we've slipped away and we come back to the present moment.
So yeah, that's the idea. Like for example, let's say, you know, I think on average, 90% of what we worry about never happens. So a lot of times we're not only projecting negativity into the future, but it's almost all unnecessary.
Exactly.
So then we're in, let's say we're in that future moment, you know, thinking about something, and I guess is it the realization that is it about having faith that things will work out, you know? And I think in my personal experience, what I believe, my personal philosophy is that things happen for the best, and that happiness is something that's available to us in almost any circumstance. That pretty much it's in our control. So regardless of what happens in the future, then we still, you know, whether it works in the way we think it should or we would like it to, or whether it doesn't, that our happiness is is apart from that. Regardless of what happens, we can maintain our happiness. What other kinds of like thoughts can we have, like, to help us, you know, to pull ourselves back from the past, that it really is gone. I mean, the past really can't affect us anymore because it's gone, and from this future that's still uncertain.
Well, let me go first to what you said about your personal philosophy, because I too have a personal philosophy that everything does happen for the best, and sometimes that's easy to see. You know, we'll look at something and we'll say, oh, that turned out just right. If this other thing had happened, it wouldn't have been as good or as happy or as beneficial. Sometimes there are difficult things in life that it is a little bit more challenging to find the happiness in, but I do believe that in every single circumstance some good comes from it. Even those situations like, like the floods that we've been having all over this country and the hurricanes, and certainly here in New York we think of 9/11. All of those terrible tragedies all still had some good come out of them. And there are some things that can create happiness in any circumstance. So that is a matter of personal framing. How do I see this situation? Do I step out? I'll give you an example of this. I broke my foot earlier this year, and I was in the house for 3 weeks. And the first time I came out into the world, out of my home, it was the end of March, and there was a cold rain. And one could look at that moment and say, God, it's cold and it's rainy and I'm on my crutches and this is really uncomfortable. And truly what the moment was to me was I could feel the rain on my toes that were sticking out of the cast. And it was just so glorious to be outdoors and to feel the rain, to feel nature, to be out in the world again. So that issue of how we see things, how we frame the present moment is very important, and we do have a choice about whether we frame it as a negative experience or as a positive experience. And when you think about it, what's the point of framing it negatively? How does that in any way benefit our lives or give us happiness? It doesn't. It doesn't. So why would we want to be the authors of our own misery? But that takes some discipline. Let me be present. Let me enjoy this moment. Let me see the good in this moment. Let me enjoy the colors, sights, and sounds around me. Let me enjoy the person I'm with. Let me see the good in the person that I'm with, rather than having that inner critic come up with the negatives that I observe in that person. So we are the authors of our own happiness in the present moment.
Right, and I imagine, there are exercises that one can use to kind of like break that habit of being in places that aren't the present. You were mentioning one called the raisin exercise.
Yeah. The 8-week mindfulness-based stress reduction program. That's a mouthful at Northern Westchester Hospital. It's based on the work of Jon Kabat-Zinn, who is a well-known American meditator and meditation promoter. He brought meditation into the prisons in Massachusetts and actually decreased the rate of recidivism by training people in meditation. But the raisin exercise is his. So what the raisin exercise is about is getting in touch with the richness of life in the present moment. And the way the raisin exercise works, and I wish I had a raisin with me, George, because I'd give it to you and we'd do this. But you take a raisin. Each person in the class takes a raisin. And how often have we ever eaten a single raisin? Right there's a new experience. And we look at what the raisin looks like. And we look at the colors and the iridescence on the surface. And we look at the little dents where the raisin has dried. And we really examine the raisin. We notice where the stem is attached to the raisin, what had been a grape at one point, and have an awareness of this raisin once being part of a vine of grapes somewhere in this country, we're assuming. And then we listen to the raisin. We rub it between our fingers and we listen to the sound that it makes. Now, who would ever think of a raisin making any kind of a sound? But there's the experience that we can have in the present moment. We smell the raisin. We notice the fragrance of the raisin. We put it in our mouth and we feel the texture of it. We allow it slowly to dissolve. We bite down and we taste the sweetness, but there are other things, there are other subtleties in the flavor of the raisin also. So as we experience the raisin in the present moment, the lesson that we have is that every present moment has so much richness to it that if we really pay attention to the color of the sky, the movement of the clouds, the color of the trees around us, perhaps the fragrance in the coffee shop. There's so much there. Why would we want to miss that? Why would we want to miss that to go back to something unpleasant that had happened previously in our lives, or even something pleasant that had happened in our lives? Why not absorb and experience the richness of that present moment. You had mentioned before also going into the future, and 90% of what we project never even happens. And when you think about that, we've spent, a lot of my work is in energy with the Reiki and the polarity. We've spent part of our life's energy on something negative that didn't even happen. And what a waste of our life's energy. Why not spend that energy on the person that we're with, or the persons that we're with, or the experience that we're having in the present moment? But again, it's not an easy thing, because we're, in a certain way, especially in our society, we're trained to go to the past and the future, and especially the future, and that's what you mentioned also, is you go easily to the future. We're trained to plan for the future, plan ahead, work the future.
Paul, I've got a question though, because a lot of times, let's say we're in a present that may not be so very pleasant, because some present moments aren't as pleasant as others. I mean, are there sometimes advantages, let's say, because also like the past and future don't have to hold negativity, right? So what do we do with these unpleasant present moments? Do we like choose at those times to go into the past and future, or can we reframe these present moments?
That's a very good question, and I think we do have to recognize that there are unhappy moments in life and there are painful moments in life. In a present moment that's unpleasant, the chances are good that in that unpleasant moment there's something that we're supposed to be learning, and that's why that unpleasant moment has come up in our life. So we can make the choice to live through that moment and be present with it, learning whatever it is that the universe has to teach us in that moment. We can escape from it also. We could go to a pleasant past and escape from it. The problem with that is the chances are we're going to have to learn the lesson that we could have learned in that present moment at some future time. We are all aware of the concept of repressing emotions, and then they squirt out sideways in some inappropriate manner. That's the same thing. If we can be present with the unpleasant experience, we'll get through it, we'll come out on the other side, we'll be okay. If we run away from it, there's a good possibility that it's going to come and bite us later. And so let's go through it. Let's learn what there is to learn from it. And we can do some reframing. We can look at that unpleasant moment as a time to learn something. Okay, I'm not liking this. Let's take something really simple. Get a notice from the bank that a check bounced. That's a minor but an unpleasant moment. So I can just throw it away and ignore it, or I can learn the lesson of making sure I don't write out checks until I've got the money in the bank, or until other checks clear, and go through that unpleasant moment, make whatever phone call needs to be made about it, and it's done. It's an experience that hopefully I've learned from. Okay, it wasn't that pleasant, but it'll give me future pleasant moments because I won't do that again. So, the present moment, even when it's not present moment when it's not pleasant, is still a rich moment. It still has experiences for us.
Right now, happiness really in the present is really about a feeling. I mean, happiness at its very essence, it's really that feeling. It's sometimes we can evoke that feeling through different thoughts or through different sensations. But you refer to a body scan. I have a feeling that has a lot to do with getting in touch with this very basic, pleasant feeling.
Yeah. In my meditation practice, and my meditation practice, I'll just step aside for a moment to talk about that. It is very much for the Western mind. To take someone who is part of our society, who's always rushing, doing a million things, multitasking, and to say to that person, okay, now be still. And it's like jumping off a cliff. It's not possible in our society. So my practice is to help people go from that great busyness to a place of calm, calmest, if you will, and to stillness. And one of the things that I do in that is to help people climb back inside their bodies and do this body scan. The reason for that is very often as we're rushing about, we literally rush out of our bodies. We are so disconnected from our bodies as we are rushing around doing whatever our tasks of the day might be, that when we come to that time to be still, we need our body, mind, and spirit to be together in one place, because often they're not. So what I have my students do is we do a body scan where we literally get in touch with the body in small pieces. We start with the breath, and the breath is a great way to get present. The breath is a present moment event. Right now, you're breathing. If you pay attention to the current breath, you will be present. You're probably not thinking about breaths of the past or breaths of the future. It's this present moment breath. So we start with breathing, and
I just wanted to word the 2-minute mark. All right, so
okay. Okay, so we'll do a quick body scan. So from the breath, we go through noticing parts of our body, noticing the forehead, noticing the eyes, noticing the mouth, doing that all the way through the body, and breathing into those areas so that we relax them. And the first part of it is noticing them, being in the present with that part of the body. And being present with the physical body allows us then also to be present in mind and spirit. So it's a great exercise for someone who's on a mission to be present and enjoy their lives,
right,
have some happiness.
You know, that is the idea of it, because like that exercise, again, happiness is a feeling, and these feelings reside in our bodies. I mean, we feel them in our mind, but they really are physiological responses to life. And that exercise, the raisin exercise, I think helps us, trains us, teaches us to tap into the pleasure that resides in our bodies at each and every moment. Paula, we've got about 50 seconds left. Before we close, can you give like some contact information about your site and your work?
Sure. I can be reached at 914-422-1784. That's my office number. And my website is www.centerforselfempowerment.org. And another piece of my business and an interesting website is www.goddessday.com. So we won't even talk about that this time, but that's an interesting site for someone to go to.
Great. Well, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. You know, I appreciate your helping us to learn how to really enjoy our present moments.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure
Thank you.
to be present with you in happiness.
Cool. Okay, well, that's all we have time for today. Thanks for watching. In the future, we'll explore other topics designed to help us better enjoy life. This is George Ortega saying, be good, think well, feel very happy, and I hope you join us again next time here on The Happiness Show.
Happiness is powerful. It's our underlying need. Happiness is why we live each day. Happiness is destiny. So let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy. Yeah, let's be so very happy.